So this is just a quirky little graphic that I have here for you guys to illustrate to you the diversity of Judaism in the Second Temple era. A lot of times people say Judaism, okay, and they just stop at that, assuming that there's this monolithic Judaism where everybody agrees and they all do the same thing. Well, the truth is actually Israel, think of Israel as like mother, having lots of children. And these are all siblings. And among those siblings are the Essenes and the Qumranite Jews who have their own ideology and their ideas. Then there are the Sadducees, there are the Pharisees, they're Zealots. These guys are related to each other. Why? Because they're all Israelites. They're all descendants of the same mother. But they have an entirely different understanding of what it means to be a Jew and how to live a righteous life and how to practice Torah. Okay? Then you have Hellenistic Jews living all over the Mediterranean. Okay? You have Jesus' Judaism. Yet another version of Judaism who has his own understanding of what it's like to live Torah and practice righteousness and the most important things in life, so to say, right? So then you have Samaritans, right? Another type of an Israelite that's surrounded about over there. And so you have Elephantine Judaism. Out there in Egypt, there's a colony of a bunch of Jews who settled as mercenaries, believe it or not, Jewish mercenary soldiers, right? Settled in Elephantine Egypt and got their own temple going and everything else. Amazing group of Jews, totally identifying with the Jews, but don't want to have to go to Jerusalem to worship. So they have their own version of Judaism out there in Egypt, okay? And then there's this group of people that we call Am Haaretz, people of the land, which is probably the biggest group out of all of these, who don't really affiliate with any of these guys, who just kind of middle of the way. Maybe they believe some of the things that the Zealots believe, and they believe some of the ideas that Pharisees believe because they go to the synagogue that the Pharisees run. But they're really a little bit more on the Zealot side, you know. But then when they go to see their cousin in Rome, they're a bit more Hellenistic. So it's like there's these people out there who don't really encompass any one of these strict ideologies, but they embrace many little bits and pieces, just like Jews today, okay? Just kind of pick and choose here, 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 there. And then there's another category that I like to show, and that's called unknown Judaism, because believe it or not, there's still probably out there communities of Jews that we didn't even know existed until we dig into something and we find it, and all of a sudden we're like, whoa, wait a minute, there's these documents, here's these records of a Jewish community that existed and have some really quirky beliefs that we didn't even know existed. So just like we discovered Qumran Jews, we could discover other Jewish communities out there, and that's exciting. So, but this is Judaism's of the Second Temple era. And so when we say Judaism, this is actually what we mean, a whole constellation of different types of Jews that believe differently, yet they're all Israelites. They all have shared history, shared language, shared heritage, and some of their values are completely overlapping, while their other values are not on the same page at all. And so that's important to understand when we get to sort of say reading the documents from that era, because you actually see Jews duking it out with each other. And that's normal. You see that in the New Testament, you'll see that in Qumran scrolls, the same thing. So here's the Dead Sea, here's Qumran. This guy tells you, so imagine Jerusalem, and then you got this little road right here, Highway 1. Yeah, you know that road through the hills, and you get over here, and then you finally get to Qumran. So,
yeah, except
and then
that's deceptively straight.
Yeah,
because it's never that straight.
It's never that straight, right, yeah. But we're talking about 12 and a half miles right here, okay, from Jerusalem, through the hills. So it's not an easy walk. But, and this is actually one of the dangerous roads. Right here up along the Jordan Valley would one of the major highways. Jericho would be located right here. You would see like a major road. But here you have Qumran, and you keep going down south. You have En-Gedi, remember where David is hiding out. Then you finally get to Masada, and you just keep following that way. And then you eventually get to, Beersheba and so on. So, but this is a little bit more of a reconstruction of what that settlement looked like. You can see what you saw. Little ruins. Now they put little walls, they put little buildings there, and one of the things that you can see is water. Look at the waterworks. And that is really important, because one of the things that scientists have found when they discovered the community that was nestled on the very ridge of this wadi. Look how they see this wadi? They're nestled on the ridge of this dry riverbed. When they discovered that, they found this elaborate work of water tunnels. Ancient plumbing, essentially. Because what these people did is they preserved water. They would dig a little channel and divert water from the wadi into one of the cisterns that they have created here. And they would circulate the water between the cisterns. They created ancient plumbing, and they preserved that water. And they used that water for their personal needs, and as well as for religious needs like purification baths that they would take all the time. So the mikvaot. So that's really what it's about. I just want you to realize they would divert the water from the wadi right into their community, and they would run these cisterns and these channels of water. It's pretty sophisticated. That's really cool. So if you've been to Qumran, you've seen a number of these. You see these in Jerusalem. You see these actually all over Israel, believe it or not. Some places they're not like well preserved, so you can just walk up to them and see them. But this is a mikveh. This is what people call a ritual bath. This is just a pool of water. Notice that there's two sides of steps. There's steps going down and there's steps going up. So a person would go down. This is where it would be filled up with water about this far, okay? So a person would go down a couple of steps and they would step in deeper into the pool. This is the deep part, okay? And they would literally immerse themselves like this, go completely underwater, and it would rise up, come out, step out of mikvah, and go worship. And people did that every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Because as they approach God in prayer, they want to show to God, the Lord, we're standing pure before you. Or at least as pure as we can try to be. And the idea of mikvah is like worship, it's like prayer, it's like confession, it's like anything else. It is our way of showing to God, Lord, we know you're holy. We know we're not, you are. So we need something to make things right. And this is our way of showing of where we stand and where you stand. And this is our recognition of where you are and where we are. So every time we approach you, we're going to approach you in purity. We're going to approach you in holiness. So people would go and cleanse themselves. So these little mikvahot, this is kind of like a small size, a personal one, were scattered all throughout the community. Some were like really, really big, huge communal ones. But the Qumran Jews, you made use of these daily. This was a big part of their worship. It was a big part of their devotion. So that's what a ritual bath a little bit looks like. Any questions? Anything that you guys have roam in your mind at this point? I just kind of go into the history. So if you got more historical questions, that'd be good.
It's been a while since I've studied this, so let me know if it's out of date. But my understanding was that part of what was going on is that the Qumran community was convinced that the Messiah is going to show up quickly, and they were trying to maintain ritual purity pretty much 24/7 in preparation to go up to the temple with him. And in fact, the community may have been made up of a number of deposed priests that the Romans had kicked out, and therefore, that's the reason they didn't go up to the temple for
Right.
worship. But they were prepared. They wanted to be prepared that the
Right.
instant the call came, they could go up and
Yes.
start retaking.
You're absolutely accurate, Michael. You're 100% spot on. Things haven't changed that much in 2,000 years. This community, as far as we know, is a priestly community. It was started by Zadokite priests. Okay, Tzadok is one of the famous priests from Davidic times. Okay, so his descendants protested some of the changes that happened in the temple and decided to move out to the desert to wait out when God will bring judgment upon their adversaries who messed things up. So God's going to come and just wipe those people clean, and then the temple will be restored, and they can go back and they can replace. Why? Because they're the legitimate priests. They're the good ones. They're the remnant. And so their idea was to go into the desert, stay pure, stay clean, be ready for when God is going to basically wipe out the sinners, and they can come and take over Jerusalem temple and restore the right worship. So that's their idea, and that's part of the reason why they were there, and that's part of the reason why they stood ready, sort of say. It's like attention, and they're just standing the whole time, ready, like any time God's going to do this, intervention.
So they were like Protestants and Puritans all in one.
Kind of. It's a movement. It's a movement of protest among the priests who basically said we can't take what's going on, so we're leaving. We're not going to be a part of this system.
Yeah.
We're going to create our own little area out there. We're going to worship the way we feel that is right, and we're going to do the best that we can with what we have. But we're not going to participate with the nonsense that you have going on here.
Peter, is it accurate to say that they likely had a self-understanding of that they were like the remnant?
Yeah, that's exactly how they saw
were-
themselves. They were the righteous remnant,
Yeah.
and everybody else is going to get wiped out. So they just got out of the way to make it easier for God. I mean, seriously, they were very apocalyptic, very end time, very much the end of the world. Everything's going to come down and crash upon everybody, and so they believed it so vehemently, which is part of the reason why they lived the lifestyle that they lived. It has to do with the apocalyptic hopes that they have. This is not meant to be a sustainable lifestyle. I mean, we talked about Essenes living the way they lived, communally, sharing everything. That's not, to me, meant to be permanent lifestyle. I mean, come on, it's not in the Torah, right? Torah is not like Communist Manifesto or anything like that. You know, there's a lot of communal things in Torah, but not exactly that way. So this was a short-term means to achieve where they needed to be, and not meant to be kind of working in perpetuity. So just keep that in mind.
That's really important. In their minds, the end of the ages were near.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, because you said they were an apocalyptic group.
Very
They were very much like the end times are here.
Yep.
We're this remnant, and we're going to be ready when the kingdom comes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They were preparing for the kingdom. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly how they saw themselves. Which is why when we read material from the New Testament and we start looking at these scenes, we start looking at the community in Acts, we see a lot of similarity. Why? Because essentially Jews do the same things. The end is coming, so what do? Well, this is what we do. This is how we make the ends meet, and this is how we organize ourselves. They organize themselves in a very similar way in the book of Acts as they did at Qumran, and other Essenes, who lived outside of Qumran did something very, very similar. So the communal way of living is just a way of passing the time to waiting for the judgment, pulling your resources together. It's a purely economic decision, not ideological or anything like that. Although Philo is going to make it all ideological, but that's a different story. Yes, Michael?
They had to be interpreted in the scripture and the events at that time, almost like naming when Messiah is coming or whatnot. So is there any record in their writings about how they're interpreting what's happening socially and governmentally with the scripture?
Yep, and I'm going to show that to you guys. That's the whole part of the plan. As I told you, we're going to read a little bit from the scrolls. I really want you to understand these people through reading some of the things that they wrote. Because once you start reading their writings, not just the Bible, because there's a lot of biblical scrolls that they found in Qumran, but then there's a lot of non-biblical writings. And those are the ones that really shed light of what these people thought, how they felt, how they worshiped, what they did. So kind of their ideology. Okay. So here's a little bit, yeah, go ahead.
Where is the scholarly community right now on, I know that there was a lot of speculation some years ago about whether Yochanan the Immerser was involved with the Essene community. Is that just still way up in the air, or has there been any kind of consensus on it?
It was a very early theory that grabbed onto that. And the reason why people grabbed onto that is because you ever realize that most of the people who handled the scrolls early on when they came out were from Orthodox Church, Coptic Church, Iranian Church. I mean, there's like a Jordanian Church. There were a lot of Catholics. And so the idea of these guys being like a bunch of monks for them was really cool. They kind of loved it. They're like, hey, they're just like us. We do this, they do this. There's just an ancient Jewish version of monks, So they kind of connected a lot of these things, and they kind of made John into a monk-like guy as well. But there's actually a vast amount of difference between John's teachings and their teachings. There are some overlaps, but what we do is what they have done is they jumped onto the connection too quickly, too soon, made conclusions, made big pronouncements, which sounds great. But then it doesn't really line up in so many other places. Like how he does what he does is not the same. And I shared a little bit about it when I did these scenes where I said, okay, these are the things that line up, and then these are all the things that don't line up. So what just happened, Yeah, we technically can have like a renegade guy, but then how he does baptism, for example, is nothing like how they do it. With the meaning that he puts into it. They do it daily multiple times. He's just like, no, just prepare for the kingdom. One time is enough. It's just like these entirely same body of water, totally different meanings. And what's important, and this is important theologically and anthropologically, is that the meaning you put behind a custom. There are a lot of peoples out there who have strange and weird customs that sometimes overlap. But what interests me is more of what do they mean by this custom? Because if the meaning is the same and the form is the same, then we have a connection. We can have the same form, different meaning. There is no connection. The form is just the form, but the meaning is different. So I get excited when the meanings overlap. That's when it really is cool. All right, so let's read a little bit from the scrolls. I just want to show you. So there's a number of what we call in the scrolls pesharim. Okay, pesher is a very special type of a commentary that Jews had at that time. The words of the prophets will be taken, and pesher is basically an analogical explanation. It's kind of like midrash, but not quite. Okay, so you're familiar with midrash, right? Midrash is just a story that embellishes the text, that brings in all sorts of, features to the text that are not really in the Torah, and the whole point of the midrash is a punchline. The whole point of a midrash is a sermon value. It's a sermonic illustration. That's what Midrash is. Now, Pesher is a little bit different. Pesher does this. Pesher, this is what the prophet said, and this is what his words mean to us today and how they've been fulfilled in our days. If you want to think of the prophecy movement among Christians, that's essentially Pesher. They read the books and they say, this is happening in our day. You see a little bit of Pesher in Matthew. You know, we read today, he shall be called a Nazarene, or for this reason, you know, the words of the prophets were fulfilled. Matthew essentially is doing something Pesher-like. It's a technique. Pesher is, like Midrash, a methodology of explaining the text, expounding the text, and using a text to achieve a spiritual goal, essentially.
Like
And
Hal Lindsey.
Hal Lindsey style.
Well, exactly. As a matter of fact,
that's what it is.
It's
Ancient version.
It's also called Raz Pesher, which is mystery interpretation.
Right.
So, and Hal Lindsey is exactly in that lines where it's like, oh, the Revelation was a mystery that we can only interpret now that we have modern technology, so we can know that these are in fact helicopters. You know.
And the scorpions are helicopters.
Scorpions and helicopters. There you go. So this is the Qumran2 would have been totally into that, by the way. They love that kind of stuff. If you read through their commentaries, that's exactly the school of theology they went to. So listen to this Pesher of Nahum. This is on the book of the prophet Nahum. So they write, where is the lion's den? The cave of the young lions. So that's a direct quote from Nahum chapter 2, verse 12, section B, part B. And then they go on. Now they're going to give the commentary. Their interpretation of this concerns Jerusalem, which had become a dwelling for the wicked ones of the Gentiles. So if you read that place in Nahum chapter 2, guess what? It's not about Jerusalem at all. But to them, it's about Jerusalem.
So were these like glosses? Were they in line with the actual text, or was it just sort of off to the side? in the margin?
It's all together.
Okay.
They quote the Bible, then they interpret it. They quote it, they interpret it, just like you would see in the footnotes of an art scroll today.
I got you.
They quote it, they interpret it. They don't have the actual text. The text is this scroll, but now I'm going to write my own little commentary, and I'm going to quote the text, which is very important because even if we have lost some of the ancient text, the Pesherim provide little bits and pieces of some of the ancient text for us, and it gives us alternate spellings and different sort of, say, versions of the text, which at that time existed. But anyway, so look how they interpret this Pesher. It's not about, you know, Babylon or anything like that. It's about Jerusalem and the wicked Gentiles over there who are dominating the whole thing. They continue. The interpretation of this passage concerns Demetrius, king of Greece, who sought to enter Jerusalem on the advice of the seekers after smooth things. But God did not give Jerusalem into the power of the kings of Greece. See how they're taking Nahum and interpreting all about their day, their time, their problems, their issues. Their issues are that these Gentile-dominated guys are dominating the temple. The whole temple is run basically proxy through Rome. They don't like that. And Rome is no different than Greece. So they're same guys, you know. And they're upset about it. And so they're talking about these seekers after smooth things who have helped them and assisted them.
Seekers after smooth things.
This is really cool stuff. I'm going to show you what this means actually. This is really neat.
I don't want to know. It's actually kind of funny as is.
But it gets better. It gets better. So number one, first of all, I want this passage, the Pesher of Nahum. A lot of times you'll see a Qumran scroll and it would be like this: 4QPNAH. So let me explain to you how the Dead Sea Scroll citation system works. Okay, the 4PQNAH. 4 is the fragment was found in the cave number 4. Okay. So all the caves that we found, cave number 4 is where it comes from. So it identifies the location. Q means it found in Qumran. There are some scrolls that are not found in Qumran. They're found in other areas, like at Masado and Nahal Khiber. There are other scrolls that were found in that general region, but not at Qumran. So the Q tells you it's a Qumran scroll. Then the P stands for Pesher. That's a particular type of genre. And then NAH is for Nahum. So you will see these little abbreviations and say, what in the world is that? Well, that's a very kind of scholarly way of how people created these little citations. And so it makes sense to people who study the Dead Sea Scrolls. If it didn't make sense to you, at least now you'll know when you see a number that it comes from the cave, that number, okay? And if you see a Q, you know that stands for Qumran. So, but anyway, even if you don't get to appreciate it, at least now you know. So here's a little bit about this pressure about the seekers after smooth things. Now, actually, you have to realize that seekers after smooth things is a very strange name because it is a derogatory nickname which was built on the Hebrew word play, which is the verb to walk and a noun that means a smooth thing. So they took words that sound alike. We do this all the time. We take a word that sounds something like something else, and we apply it, and we kind of pretend and play around with it. Okay, they do the same things, only in Hebrew.
A malapropism.
You got it. That's the proper term for it, a malapropism. Take it.
I resemble that.
You're always good with this stuff.
Rodney Dangerfield was a master of it.
Yes.
I resemble that remark.
I resemble that word. All right, so here's how it breaks out. You want to understand seekers after smooth things, who these people are? Here you go. So in Hebrew, seekers of the smooth things, you have a word play. Dorshei ha-halachot. Look at that. Halachot. So what is a halacha?
Seeker of the path.
Halacha is the way you walk, okay? Halach, right here. This verb means to walk, okay? So the seekers, darash, like we just have darash, right?
Yes.
Rabbi Ryan just gave darash. So darash is a seeking out what this text means.
Yes. Dorshe.
It's, yeah. So you have darshei ha-halachot, the seekers of the walks or the paths of Torah. Torah is implied. So people who walk along the path. These are the practitioners of the Torah. That's a term. So you call people who walk according to the law of the Torah, dorshei ha-halachot. They're walking the path. Okay, they're the walkers. Now here's what you do, is you take a word that sounds a lot like that. Halak means a smooth things. Smooth thing, something that's just soup. Shiny and smooth. And that's not a verb, but that's a noun. So you take and you say dorshei ha-halakot. It sounds a lot like, you can't even tell the difference. Dorshei ha-halachot, dorshei ha-halakot. Halak and halach, they sound a lot alike to our ear. You almost can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's the pun. Now, the walkers or the seekers of the ways to walk, the Torah, become the seekers of smooth things. Because what they're really seeking, what they're really looking for, is an easy way in life. That's the pun. They don't really want to walk the Torah. They want to go around it. They want to find a loophole. They want an easy way, smooth way to live. There's the smooth guys. They're the slick guys.
Yeah.
Think about it.
They hire the Shabbos.
So you want to know who they are? This is how the Qumranite Jews mocked the Pharisees. They laughed at their desire to make Torah smooth and easier to follow through the traditional interpretation and through innovative teachings. They weren't really in the Torah. So the tradition of the fathers that was added onto the Torah made the commandments easier to follow. They created a halacha, okay, which the Qumranite Jews said, I can't believe these people are doing it. These are the slick willies. They are smooth guys. They're so smooth with their interpretations. They're taking Torah away from what it was meant to be. And that's why they mocked them and called them the seekers of smooth things. It's a code language. And so you see this code language all throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls where they just make fun. They just make fun of Pharisees. That's what they do. They just...
So the Pharisees were just very liberal and...
Here's the
Which
big
is
thing.
hilarious.
Here's the big
considering
thing.
popular
Yeah.
conception
Most of
today.
you think of Pharisees as the conservative guys. But the Qumranites thought Pharisees as liberals. They're the innovators. They take tradition and they bring it into the interpretation of Torah.
Progressive.
They're progressive, right?
Yeah.
They are interpreting, they're activists in their interpretation of Torah.
Eco-Zionists.
Eco-Zionists, whatever you call them. They are absolute activists. They want everything modern. They want to modernize Judaism. They want to make it all uniform. They want to create prayers that didn't exist before. They want to create customs that didn't exist before. They want to have this, everything is just going to line up in all the lines and boxes, right? Where the Qumranites say, that's not how things are supposed to be. They're the followers of the old way. And they're fine just the way they are. And now these Pharisees come in and they kind of take over the whole political climate. And they don't like that. So they have a big deal with Pharisees, and they actually call them liberals. That's what they are. That's why they call them secret or smooth things. I know you don't think of Pharisees as liberals, but believe it or not, there were guys in Israel that were more conservative than Pharisees. And Essenes and Qumranites were definitely on the scale of being more conservative. They are most rigid about their practices. If I start telling you about how they actually practice their daily walk with God, you're going to say, I don't want to join that religion.
Yeah.
They were strict. They were very strict. So this is just something for you guys to think about. We're just having fun looking at just one little passage. So next session we'll get into more about reading from more different texts. I'm going to go through different texts that were found to kind of explain to you what this whole library, what the big discovery really is. And then we'll drill into more texts from Qumran to give you little bits and pieces of their life.